Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 10:30. Sherry, if you could do my roll call for me.
Jeff Swearingen.
Present by phone.
Patrick Updike.
Here on the phone.
David Lorenzen.
Here.
Marty Smith. Tom Lampy.
Here.
John Benson. Bob Von Wolfrat. Denise Pavlik. Andy Buffington.
Here.
Ellen Hagan.
Here.
Deb Crable.
Here.
David Ness.
Here.
Jason Leonard.
Here.
Ted Kamachis. Michael Casper.
Here.
Carol Lund Smith.
Here.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grosskirth.
Here.
Senator Feenstra. Senator Brace. Representative Kressig. Representative Holt. Craig Allen.
Here by phone.
Helen Troyanovich. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our board meeting this morning. Hopefully, we'll wrap this up as quick as we can. We did get started on time today, so that's great. I'm looking for the approval of today's agenda, but I am going to amend today's agenda if I could, please. One item I would like to add under new business would be the SWIC letter to agencies in the state, and I'll explain that when we get to it. And the other one is grant language added in the SCIP. Craig Allen will talk about that. If I could get a motion to approve today's agenda with those two items, please.
So moved.
Okay, first. Have a second?
Second.
Second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Looking for the approval of the meeting minutes from October 13th, 2016. If I could have a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. SWIC report, Mr. Allen, if you could hear us.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Allen recently had surgery, is at home now recovering from his rotator cuff. So thank you for showing up on the phone.
Well, we have lots of good medication here, so I hope this report makes sense.
Don't ramble.
First, I'd like to talk about the LMR activities that went on. We have a couple of entities that are wanting to move forward very quickly, and I've spent some time this last month on working on the talk group IDs and aligning the interoperability IDs aspect of that, along with the user IDs component, which is important for those of you that may not be familiar with the trunk system. It's basically your telephone number saying that you can have access to talk to who you can have access to. The user ID provides that information, and then the talk group says what party line you can be on because it's a one-to-many, not one-to-one. So that has been taking up, believe it or not, a pretty significant amount of time. And during the TIA meeting that I attended in Philadelphia last month, I was able to find a number of the vendors and manufacturers to have conversations with them about what we are doing, because as I think I've mentioned before, and I think it's very important that this board understand that the TDMA aspects of P25 are still being developed. So we're not only on the leading edge, in many ways, we're on the bleeding edge. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But let's remember how we got here, and that is part of it was the 700 megahertz frequency bands were supposed to be chopped in half again down to narrow banded, if you will. And the state of Iowa was looking out in front of that, and in an effort to cost contain, they bid a phase 2 system, which was 6.25 rather than 12.5 kilohertz channel. I realize that's very technical, but the point is that Iowa was being very fiscally conservative in trying to get out in front of the narrow banding and did the right thing at the right time with the information they had. During the time of the bid award and during the time of this change within Iowa, going to a new system, the FCC came back and rescinded their order for narrow banding of the 700 megahertz spectrum. And so they didn't say you can't. In fact, they encouraged that you should, not that you must, that they would like to see us do that. And so Iowa's doing that. The challenge is that there are a lot of other places that have not made that choice yet. And in fact, I was able to locate through one of the vendors an Element in Canada who I've not had an opportunity to reach out to yet to talk to about the ISSI interface and some other elements that we will need to talk about as we go forward. If you remember, we do have later on an ISSI committee meeting. But I'm bringing this up because the value added of attending those TIA conferences and that week of time probably is the best investment that I get to make in a particular quarter that pays dividends to you all as my board down Lash Road. Think of it as going to 9 hours or 10 hours of college every day for 4 or 5 days. It's just some of the brightest people on the planet in this space are in the same place at the same time and arguing over some very interesting things, but then also very operational things that will affect us. So I wanted to share with you that we're getting some return on investment out of that particular undertaking, and it's directly affecting the LMR. So as we move forward with TDMA, time division multiplex algorithm, I believe is what it's called, multiple access algorithm.
Hey, Jess, which one are you in?
I'm sorry?
There's other people on the phone. If you could mute your line.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. So the good news is that the thing we talked about last year when we started taking a look at the TIA is that we are in fact the first statewide system that's being built from the ground up, starting from the ground up as TDMA, and there are a lot of things that we're going to get an opportunity to work through and blaze a trail, if you will, first, one might say. So I'll move on from that. The next one is FirstNet. Spent a good deal of time this month talking about FirstNet and how we can improve our outreach and how we can get ready for when FirstNet does award their contract. When that happens, they're going to put their foot on the gas very hard, very quick for all of us that have been involved in this for some time. So right now it feels like nothing's really going on, and in fact it isn't. So Rick Bart and others will report out on this later, but when they get that RFP done and it gets an award, they're going to put their foot on the gas, and we're going to have to be ready to respond to that in timeliness, just like we are with the LMR. So just wanted to remind the board members of that and let them know that we're trying to stay up to speed on the changes that may be going on there and remain in alignment with our broadband committee. I then attended the National Council of SWICs meeting in Oklahoma for a week. And that is where the National Council of SWICs, the 56 SWICs, come together and meet on a variety of topics. Encryption was one of the primary topics that we talked about this time. We also meet with SafeCom, which is the National Communication Consortium, if you will, hosted by DHS. And a number of the topics there were around two primary elements. One is how do we manage the encryption component, because we know it's coming. We know we're going to have a Homeland Security event that's going to push us to need to have more opaqueness so that the bad guys aren't able to track what police, fire, and EMS are doing. How do we get prepared for that? Because there is resistance across the board, not just in Iowa, but across the board on the encryption component. And then secondly, we are trying to plan for and think through how do we manage all of these multitude of things that come out of NG 911. And how does all of that affect interoperability? Because before it's just been voice. Now it's everything or anything. And so we've been looking at what is the role for the groups and how do we better position ourselves for the future as a nation, with the 56 SWICs at least being the only element of contact between the states that goes on a regular basis. I will come back and talk about grant language under new business. I do want to remind everyone that there was just an election, and for those folks that have believe that they have an understanding of what grants may mean in the future, I asked them to question that. This election may have changed things. We did have a discussion about that at the National Council of SWICs, depending upon who was elected, what does that mean? And I must tell you, everyone that I talked to is pretty sure they don't have any idea what's going to happen in January with regard to public safety grants and things like that. So for those of us that have been reliant on that, we might want to start thinking about other alternative sources of funds. And I just bring that up as a general cautionary. I hope it isn't true, but if it works out to be that way, thinking about it longer won't work against us. So with that in mind, Chair, that's probably the highlights of what I would like to share with the group today. I'm open to any questions.
Any questions for the SWIC?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to mute now.
Okay. Our deputy SWIC is ill. Craig, I don't know if you have any knowledge of the SWIC region interoperability committees or not. If not, that's fine. We'll just glaze over it and go on to.
Well, what I'd like to do, we do oftentimes have them on the phone. So what I'd like to do is, if I could, I'll take that. I didn't know that Helen was sick today, but I'll just go and do a roll call to see if any of the Ricks are on the call or in the room. And if they are in the room, you'll have to let me know because I can't see them. There's still a couple-minute time delay between what you do and what I see. So, Rick 1, are you on the line, and can you give us a report on the activities that's taken place in the last 30 days for you, Rick? Okay, thank you. Rick 2, is anyone on the line for Rick 2? Rick 3, anyone on the line for Rick 3? Rick 4? Rick 5? Thank you. Rick 6? Thank you. Mr. Chair, what I recommend is, I know that these RICs take time to put together a report for us, and I expect that those have been provided to Helen in the form of a written. What I'd like to do is Helen will put that together and forward it out to the board members and yourself so that this will not go as a blank spot on this month's report.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the chair right here. Are you going to do it, Stephen? Okay. Blake?
And this meeting being able to start on time. The $4.4 million in grants that was allotted for this year's 911 consolidation grant have been claimed, so there was no grants to approve at the 911 council meeting. Also, the consolidation workshops that we've held throughout the state, 5 of them, are now complete. About 200 people statewide attended those, so very good turnout and interest in what is being done there. The report is due to us December 15th. It's due to the legislature from us on January 15th. So we're working with the vendor pretty closely. We anticipate seeing those documents here before too long. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Chair Buffington, User Group.
Unfortunately, I was unable to attend our user group committee meeting last month, and my vice chair is not here, so there's no report from user group committee. I know that there was no applications in front of us, but we will have 2 next month.
And which 2 are those?
Des Moines Police Department and Kossuth County.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee, Chair Grosskirth.
Finance Committee met Tuesday at 2 p.m. via phone, and we discussed our financials, which were recommended for approval by the board. The annual appropriation that we get from the state So far in fiscal year 2017, the board has spent $21,866.82, and we still have $273,981 available from that fund. On our Sleepy grant, this month we spent $50,889. Remember, that is an 80-20, 20% is the states and 80% is the federals. And that is larger than normal this month because of the ICN professional services for FirstNet project were billed from July 1st through September 30th. Approximately 23,000 of that amount was for that. Everybody's on board. They are going to be billing that on a much more regular basis now, so we don't get hit with such a large amount, and we'll know what our financial status truly is. Left in our grant is $881,355. That was, we only had financials this month, so,
Okay, was Nikki on the meeting?
no, Nikki was not.
Okay.
Tina was.
And the reason I asked is I had a conference call with Sleep P people, with the grant, all the states did the other day. And what they want to do, we're going to talk about this next week in Phoenix on a sidebar with all the SPOCs, but what they informed us was there are states in the country that haven't used or do not plan to use all of their Sleep P funding. So there's quite a bit of funds there. They're estimating approximately $40 million will be not used. So they're giving the opportunity for those states that are not going to use it to put that back into a fund. They're not requiring them to. They're asking them if they would like to, and then once they get that number, they'll put that back, and then they'll redistribute again to the other states, to all the states. So we're guaranteed at least some funding, and they're thinking a 2-year stint. For sure, a first year with 2019. Ours expires February of 18. Okay. So they would redo that, and so February we'd have another year with some money based on what the math comes out, based on what how big the pot is after we're done. So, which is good news because we could extend now some finances for FirstNet outreach, which we do now with Sean and the SWIC and ICN and data collection and things like that. We could extend that possibly to 2020. So with some more funding. So I'll keep you apprised on that, and I'll, when I go to the SPOC meeting, I'll have some more definite information, but that was what the discussion was about. Okay?
Good.
Okay. Governance Committee, Swick Allen, were you on the call or was there a meeting? There was no meeting? Okay.
Yes, there was. It was myself and one other person.
Oh, there was, okay. You are the chair now, correct?
Allegedly.
Okay,
Yes, there was a meeting and it was very brief, but I did have opportunity I met with the prior chair, Bob Uni, and he gave me about 6 inches worth of historical documentation, which I'll start sifting through. Priority one is I've got to get with Andy to talk about the UGC stuff that those two committees were kind of working with. But officially, yeah, I've taken over the governance committee at this point.
anything else? Okay. Move on to operation.
First of all, I want to apologize for missing last month's meeting, especially after.
One is green.
Not working.
There it goes. Oh, it's.
Sorry about that. First of all, I want to apologize for missing last month's meeting, especially being named the operations
Again.
I read Swick Allen's discussion at the last meeting.
Spoke it again, Deb.
Yeah, you don't have to hold it.
And it seemed very well. We had a meeting by phone a couple weeks ago of the committee. This one isn't working now either. Okay. Only me. The STR trailers are a priority at this time. It's my opinion that the readiness of the trailers is one of our most important responsibilities. Being ready and prepared for the efficiency and effectiveness of those trailers will reflect upon our operations committee as well as our Isicsb board. So a good example of how important those trailers are is one of the trailers was used during the Cedar Rapids flooding incident a couple months ago. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Captain Paramedic Curtis Walzer of the Cedar Rapids Fire Department, who I consider to be the jack-of-all-trade technician for the Isicsb board. He was instrumental during that flooding, and I'd like him to share how the STR trailer benefited that incident.
Absolutely. Thank you. Obviously, you've probably heard back in September we had a second 1,000-year flood about 8 years after our first one. We did see the second highest crest ever, the Cedar River in Cedar Rapids, at 22 feet. And part of that response and preparation work was securing what we believe to be the flood zone. The number of checkpoints for citizen access was determined to be about in the 75 range, give or take. It was at that point where our incident management team called in requesting the National Guard to assist with those checkpoints. And they were more than willing to mobilize and mobilized immediately. But one of the needs they had was to communicate with those checkpoints as well as communicate with our incident management team. And they don't, because they're a military asset, they don't carry a lot of domestic radio resources with them. In fact, very few. However, we, as the board's aware, with the COMEXs that have been done in the past, the communication exercises at Camp Dodge, we were very familiar with what type of radio equipment they brought, and we were familiar with what their needs were. So we put out a request for the East STR trailer through our county EOC, through our EMA. They contacted the state duty officer, and the state duty officer authorized the trailer to be sent to Cedar Rapids. It's thanks goes to Dave Wilson with Johnson County EMA, who housed the East STR trailer. He transported it up and delivered it at the National Guard facility for us. We kind of had our hands full and didn't have the resources to go down and get it, so he helped us out with that. The batteries were charged, the radios were accounted for, everything was ready to go. Pulled it on site. As soon as their point of contact was identified, we walked through how to use the equipment, how to hand it out, and really what we needed was a cache of portable radios. And they had 2 soldiers, 12-hour shifts, working each of those 75 or so checkpoints. We were able to issue we issued out all of the East STR radios, along with all of my USAR cache radios. We had a lot of radios in the field, and the STR was critical. We did not have that quantity if without it. We didn't use any of the repeater equipment or the interop gateway that's in the trailer because we had enough infrastructure to support it, but what we needed was those cache kind Had we needed the repeater, it was ready to go, of course, and could have been stood up at any time. So definitely a kind of important real-world experience where it really paid off. Throughout the process, in working with, if you remember, Colonel Rob Hedgepeth that had been here, he was the one that set up the COMEXs. He called me, actually I called him, and about the same time that the National Guard was being spun up. And in about 20 minutes, with a napkin in our break room, we were able to lay out a communications plan to connect the STR resources to the military resources. And we actually ended up doing the exact patch that we had done twice at the COMEXs in Camp Dodge and had proved that it worked. So it was a matter of set up the antenna, set up the equipment, and flip the switches on. And I mean, it's an example for any ComL, ComT, anybody that's gone through the training of how if you play like you practice, it worked excellent. And they were able to communicate all those points. They had their representative at our city command post that was interfacing with their personnel, so they didn't interfere with public safety, but they were right by our side at any point. And likewise, there was a after action report. They interrupted a couple of thefts in progress. They had 2 medical emergencies that they were able to get first responders to, as well as a number of other minor incidents. So it really showed collaboratively how all of these pieces come together. Couldn't have predicted, wouldn't predict it again, couldn't have predicted it at the time. But thanks for the support, and I know it helped us in the city of Cedar Rapids.
Thank you, Captain. With that, the importance of the STR trailers. Before Sheriff Comanche left the committee, the importance of inventorying and establishing a maintenance schedule for the trailers was discussed by the Operations Committee. So the committee is going to be working hard on getting that accomplished. At the last meeting, it was discussed to also look at the compatibility with the SIP, and this will be a part of the inventory process that our committee will conduct. The location of the central and west STR was also discussed, as there seems to be some limited access to where it's located at the JFHQ. So we're looking at and reaching out to them to see if we can get easier access, more persons that can have access, so that these are readily available when there is an incident. So it's important for that. We want to bring the trailers up to date, fixed up and ready to roll, so if needed. So we're anticipating the Operations Committee will have a significant and urgent issue that might be appearing in February, so we want to get these trailers up and running. In February, the federal projects are anticipated to release the draft plan for the state of Iowa in regards to the FirstNet, and I'm sure the Operations Committee will be playing a part in that, so we really want to get these trailers going. We may need funding in getting these trailers going, and we will discuss that when it comes. Thank you.
Is there any plan to, as part of that, to get the radios programmed for the system, statewide system?
Yes,
Some type of a
once we
plan
see that
that's in
that
there?
is needed, yes.
Okay. All right, and then I'm assuming you're looking at the batteries and the tires and all that. Okay, good deal. Good work. That needed to be done, kind of expedited, and I appreciate does take a lot of time. Okay, outreach, Chair Benson, are you still the chair there, or who is taking your spot? Or do you want to do both?
I think there's yes. I think it's a failure to communicate. I kept waiting and waiting, and I finally put the host in, and I don't remember who else was on, but there was only one by the time I kicked on, and we went, I don't know.
Okay.
So I need to talk to you to find out what I need to do if I'm taking over.
Are you taking over? This is a better question. I would like you to.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, since I got Deb to do that.
And you can work with Sean Wagner for the FirstNet piece on outreach on that also. So.
Okay.
But outreach does need to kind of pick up the pace a little bit on the system based on some of the things that I'm hearing that nobody knows much about it. And we did some webinars, which are
Right.
great, but
Yep,
now I
they
think
were
we need to
good.
take another step more than that, whether it's more webinars or go to meetings or whatever we need to do in your areas that we can explain what's happening here. Because it's, as Melvin will probably explain here in a little bit, it's ramping up pretty quickly here. So,
Okay, I'll get on it.
all right. Okay, Sean, are you available? There you go.
Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to update everybody on is the website. It's going through final stage security testing with the OCIO. Just so everyone knows, this takes weeks. So they run it through a hardened process to make sure that if there's any flaws, that they're detected. But I'm very excited, and I think you'll be very excited when you see this website. It's very good. It will make your lives much easier when you're sharing documents and working with the public and getting comments and making sure it's all cataloged. We're also adding a couple of new forms. I spoke with the chair the other day about the process to apply for the Isicsb platform. And so we are looking at putting together a form on the website, and I'll reach out to Chair Buffington as well. We are finalizing the a WISE logo. We've been working on that. I put together a couple of samples and I circulated them. We feel this is important because when this pilot is successful, we believe that many states, and hopefully our state, will pick this up as an actual project and make this more available to public safety across the state at all the schools. So we thought it was an important investment the chair did to create a logo that would demonstrate this. So I'll be sharing that with the board upcoming. The ComT video was also released. We had a lot of positive feedback on the ComT video. I know everybody is raising the bar constantly on what the next video and their expectations that I'm going to deliver. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Please take that in consideration. I am a newbie. This is only my fifth video. So, but I appreciate the board's support as well as the public safety support. It's been very, very positive. People in public safety have been sending us emails saying thank you and that they appreciate us doing these videos for them. Outreach, we are upping our game on the metro outreach. We've been working heavily with the ICN, and I don't want to take away all the wind from John Tell's report, but we are getting heavily ready to post more small videos. We have about 5 or 6 in queue. These will be small PowerPoint videos to talk about main points with FirstNet. We're very excited about this. Helen has been working on one for Chasm as well. These are small videos, 2 minutes, just to explain high points, like what's opt-in, opt-out, 2 minutes on that. What is public safety grade, 2 minutes on that. These will be very concise videos so that the people that can't make the outreach, we're trying to give them bite-sized morsels of what this is and what we're trying to get everybody educated about. As far as scheduling, we're going to try and do an aggressive schedule. I don't know if we're going to make it. We're going to try and do 6 more on-site visits yet this year. That's our goal. It's a very aggressive goal, but we're going to try and do it. We also know that we've been having some difficulties getting Region 6 more involved. And Region 6 is a very populous region of the state, so I know that our outreach group is heavily focused on making sure that we get feedback and get Region 6 working alongside of us. It would be difficult to have interoperability without the biggest population centers in the state not participating and making sure that our user group committee is getting accurate and available feedback in those sections of the state. Right now, I have 3 videos in queue that I'm working on. The FirstNet State of the State with the updates that we got from Chair Rick Lumbar as well as Chair Lampy from their interactions with FirstNet. So we're building a new PowerPoint, new video, enhancing the video. We're hoping to get this out yet this year, as well as the WISE video to educate everyone on what this WISE pilot is. And if I haven't explained it before, it's Wi-Fi internet for school emergencies. It's an Wi-Fi internet dedicated to public safety on the ICN backbone, available at 3 schools in the state of Iowa: Marshalltown, Martinsdale, and Norwalk. It's actively in test right now. We're doing further outreach to make sure that we get more officers and firefighters and paramedics on the system, make sure that they're using it. We do have some troopers using it already. So again, we're literally, I'm going to go put butt and seat in next to them in the car with a technician. We're going to turn it on for them and make sure that they know it takes less than 5 minutes for us to set it up and document the benefits. So quite literally, I'm going to sit there with a camera with a technician and get an officer or a paramedic or a firefighter, and we're going to turn it on in their vehicle and make sure that they can see some benefits and ask them to test things and if they see a difference. So our outreach has been a little slow on this because of technology and policies, but we believe that by putting button seat, we think it'll be a much more effective time, and we'll be able to demonstrate to these officers that, hey, this only took you 5 minutes. If you can demonstrate that this has value to you, hopefully you'll talk to other officers in your agencies and say, hey, look, this was only 5 minutes of my time and the benefits have been superior for what I do in my patrol car. Other than that, that's a summary of what I've been working on.
Okay.
Listening to Sean, I'm reminded, Sean was on the phone with me.
I was on the phone with you.
And then he sent me one of the videos to look at, and the
ComT.
T one. They're good. It was good.
Thank you
It was
very
good.
much. Thank you.
We'll move on to training committee. Chair Pavlik, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay.
Our committee did not meet due to a bunch of scheduling conflicts. However, I just would like to some reminders. We will be hosting December recruiting for the team. There's an incident communication center manager class. We are looking at potentially scheduling possibly March 13th of 2015 for an all-hazard incident dispatcher training class. And then we are also looking at trying to get something scheduled for NG 911 strategic planning course. We're going to try to work closely with Blake regarding maybe putting together a facilitated type discussion sometime next year in May, if possible. So those were some of the things on the horizon. I do want to say great job to Sean Wagner on the ComT video. We had talked about it in the training committee. Thought it was an excellent idea, and I think he did an awesome job. So I just wanted to say kudos to him. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Thank you. Chair Updike, are you on the phone for technology this morning?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
The technology committee met October 27th, 1300 hours. Hopefully in front of you, you have a printout of the public notice, Isicsb 12-B. We revisited this topic again. If you look at it, you will see that any changes in this document have been marked up in yellow and green. And it's been considerably gutted out, if you will. The channel names, the frequencies, that stuff was all taken out. The reason for that was that the members of the committee thought it would be a good idea to do that and attach an ICS 217A form to that, which you should also have a printout of that. If you look at that 217A example from Rob Dennard, it has all of the interoperability channel from the VHF band clear through the 800 meg band, as well as the 154.280, 155.475, and 155.340, and point-to-point. The idea of doing this was to have this policy revised so that we don't have to keep coming back to change it. If we want to change anything that's associated with this public notice, we just do it on the ICS 217A form, and that form also provides the user who may need to print it out the information that they need as far as naming conventions and frequencies, tones, et cetera, et cetera. But when you go back to the actual policy there, it still references the DHS NIFOG link and all of the tones and DCS, NAC, CSQ designations that you saw in the previous revision. So one of the things that needs to be done with this 217 form is looking into adding additional frequencies. Some of the frequencies that had been discussed as far as adding to this form is VTAC 33 and additional frequencies in the 800 megahertz band. None of that's been decided yet because we ran into some roadblocks on deciding what frequencies to use. Do we use the frequencies that are set up by the FCC for 5 kilohertz deviation or 4 kilohertz deviation? They're basically, those frequencies are set up in two different categories. So we're trying to decide if we're going to add those additional 800 megahertz frequencies, what deviation do we want to use, channel spacing, or do we use both? So we're going to have to revisit it. But the one thing we can do is we can push this over to governance if they want to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and do what needs to be done as far as the wording on that policy. We're up for that, and then when we come back with the frequencies that we need to add to that, then we can go ahead and put that on that 217A form. As far as the additional frequencies that we would be looking at, there's a possibility for licensing of those frequencies, and the licensing of those frequencies would have to, some of that has to go through the RPC depending on what band it is, like 700 or 800. And we would also probably need to get board approval to go ahead and move forward with not only getting approval from RPC for those frequencies, but to also move forward with FCC licensing. Kind of a heads up on that. So that's it for that particular topic. The other item that came up was the statewide frequency plan and updates. We talked about this last month. The idea was to bring the LEATAC EMS and fire plans together and try to refine them and bring that within the technology committee. I've done some reading on some of these plans that are out there. Some of them are rather outdated. You've got dates that are in the 1980s and 1990s, and although some of that information is really good, the thing that you have to remember is that a lot of that information was based on technology that has been changed from wideband to narrowband, and so you have to really stop and think, okay, how much of this do we want to take in and try to refine? Do we want to look at all of those issues that exist in LEATAC that address antenna spacing on towers? I mean, there's just a lot of information in some of these old plans that we have to figure out, do we really want to tackle that? Because these are mostly operational plans from what I can see. Now, I don't know if Rob Dannert is there. Maybe Curtis would like to speak to that. But these are some things that are kind of creating roadblocks for getting this done. But it is a work in progress. So if there's any questions on either one of these items, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll be done. Thank you.
Okay, Pat, thanks. John Tell. National Public Safety Broadband Subcommittee for ICE for FirstNet.
Yes, good morning. I'm providing the report on behalf of FirstNet Broadband Committee Chair Rick Lombard. FirstNet did release a statement that they would not be announcing the selected prime vendor for the network by the previously set due date of November 1st. There is some more coordination that has to take place between other agencies such as the FCC, the NTIA, and the Department of Commerce. So they have not released a new announcement date, so we'll definitely keep everyone posted on that. The draft state plans for the network will be released at the same time across the nation, but that release will depend on when the prime vendor is released, the name of the prime vendor. In the last committee meeting, the committee did vote to convene an immediate special meeting when that draft state plan is released to review the plan and provide recommendations. That meeting will include the regional interoperability councils. So once the feedback is put together and the recommendation is put together by the committee, it will be given back to the Isicsb to review. Rick also plans on meeting with private sector leadership to review the plan and get their feedback as well. When the state plan is released, it's expected to be put into an electronic portal, which actually has two ways to access that. There will be a portal for public safety, and that state plan will include coverage, services, applications and features, as well as devices and accessories. And there will also be a portal for the governor to access that will detail policy, compliance, timeframes, and costs, as well as interoperability. So that will be an electronic portal for both public safety and the governor. In my update last month, I mentioned that the FirstNet Broadband Committee Chair Lombard and Chair Lampy traveled to Colorado and spent some time at the FirstNet testing lab, testing different devices and technology for NIPSTIC standards and also public safety grade requirements. We did have some discussion on the devices at the last meeting, so I just wanted to briefly cover some of those devices with you all. There are 3 rugged devices that are being tested and qualified for Band 14 right now, and some are already in use. All devices are Android devices right now. There are 2 in-vehicle routers that Sierra Wireless and Motorola Solutions have been approved and certified for Band 14, and those routers would be installed in the public safety vehicles and would provide like a Wi-Fi canopy around the vehicle for several hundred feet. Right now, there are no approved Band 14 tablets that have passed the Band 14 certification, and there are 2 handheld radios that are being reviewed to be equipped for Band 14 in the future. So right now, technology and device testing continues. There is a process that those devices have to go through to be approved. FCC regulatory approval, and then it will go through commercial carrier acceptance, and then finally FirstNet carrier acceptance before it's deemed as an approved device. One of the last things we discussed are the Metro engagements that Sean kind of touched on. Sean, myself, and Deputy Swick Troyanovich have been working to put together the Metro engagement presentations on FirstNet. Our first presentation right now is in RIC 2 on November 2nd, and so we'll be providing a FirstNet update there, and then Sean is working on an update or a schedule for the other RICs as well. Lastly, in the last meeting, we did vote to continue the same meeting schedule for 2017, so the meetings will continue to be held on the first Tuesday of every month at 1 p.m. At the Orrin Pate Building, with the exception of July because of the July 4th holiday. That meeting will be moved back to July 11th. And that concludes my report. Unless there are any further questions. I'm not sure if Rick is on the line, if he has anything to add, but that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to other reports, information sharing. Open up to the board members. I have a few things, but I'll open it up first if anybody else needs to share amongst ourselves information. Okay, I want to make sure that Melvin McCradle and I, our Motorola partner, did 2 presentations. One was Homeland Security Conference, and we also did one at the NENA Conference on the update on what the system's about, and cleared up probably 10 misconceptions. As with any project of this size, there's going to be assumptions made and misdirection for whatever reason. So we had some things that we cleared up, and after the presentation was over, after we got those misconceptions cleared up and questions answered, We had several people come up after each presentation and said that really makes a big difference. They did not know that was the case. So I'll give you a copy of those presentations. We'll put it on the website so you can see those. I would encourage you to look at, it's close to the end of the PowerPoint to find those misconceptions that we have cleared up. And his eyes wide open now, and hopefully that continues. So we get the right information about what this system is all about and what it can do for you. The other thing I just want to share is make sure, and we'll have to send out, we've had a lot of movement on chairs here on the committees, so we want to make sure that we do a pre-board meeting chair call that Jason handles, and we also do a post-board meeting chair call. It takes 15 minutes. I would appreciate if, I'll send out a new invite with the new chairs, if you could jump on that line here before the meeting. It's usually a day or two before the board meeting, so ensure that we get the agenda locked down on what you would like as a chair to be on the agenda. That's what the purpose of that pre-chair call is. And the post-chair call is for anything wrapped up that we didn't cover that you needed to cover, or your thoughts on how the board meeting went. So that's the purpose of those. So I'll send out the invites. It's a conference call, and Jason handles those for me. And appreciate if you could jump on that call, or your vice chair if you can't as a chair. So. Anything else from board members? Okay, is Jim Lundstedt on the phone? Okay, our project manager, Melvin, if you'd like to take the podium and give us a quick update on the system status.
Good morning. As you probably heard by now, we've been pretty active for the last couple of weeks, and I just want to give a quick update as to all the activities taking place to date. We have a pretty aggressive construction work schedule, and so we're working on foundations. That's for towers, for generators, for LP tanks, and for the shelters as well. We're working on tower modifications. These would be towers that are existing that we did loading analysis to determine if it would support the additional load and to bring it up to spec. So we have towers that are, we've ordered steel, we have the steel in-house, and we have to start modifying the towers, brace the towers, make them stronger to support the load. So by the end of the year, we'll be dropping shelters, generators, and LP tanks in different places throughout the state. There's other ancillary work like fencing work, for example, to secure the compounds. And we have work in really all of 6 different regions. For example, in Region 1, we have 5 sites that we're working on. On Region 2, we have 2 sites that we're working on. On Region 3, we have 5 sites. On Region 4, we have 4 sites. On Region 5, we have 4 sites. In Region 6, we have 8 sites. So we really are scattered throughout the entire state. And we do have a small army of people that are, we've been working to get them pre-approved to work throughout the different sites throughout the state. So while that is going on, we're also working in the background to develop what we call child keys. Child keys is what enables the different entities that join the state to maintain control of their own operations. So what these child keys do enables those system managers to do, as an example, Dallas County or Woodbury or Westcom, and anybody else that keeps on being added, is that they are generated a special key that allows them to control and program the radios that they have for their own operations. And that also limits so that they don't go outside of that. So we're doing that for right now for Dallas County, Woodbury, Westcom, and even for state agencies as well. The biggest thing to remember here is that everybody thinks that the state agencies, because they're the state, they have control of everything. And the state agencies will be just like any other agency, just like Dallas County or Woodbury or anybody else. They're going to have limits set upon them by their own keys as well. So that's something that we're working on in the background as well. Overall, we continue to make progress, a lot of hard work, and great weather to do it. So other than that, I look forward working with you with outreach. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do, and I can support you in those efforts as well. As the construction phase of this starts rolling, that kind of takes a life of its own, and I have a PM that's dedicated for that, so I can start shifting to focus on outreach and having general meetings or even specific meetings to make sure that we get the word out on the specifics of the systems and the progress and the kind of misconceptions that Chair Lampy mentioned.
Melvin, could you get that presentation to Sean so he can post that on our
Yes.
website? I know it's pretty big, so I don't know if he could do it by USB or Google Drive or whatever we need to do.
Yes.
Get that out there.
I'll make them available to Sean.
Okay.
Okay?
Melvin?
He was hoping he'd get away without you.
Yes, sir.
This is quick. Hey, I was at the CIA meeting.
I had a number of conversations with a number of vendors, and one of them brought up a very good topic. And I didn't know if you wanted to share this with the group, but some of the concerns that come up about these big systems is that there's a fear that someone has access to information of someone else without the appropriate authorities. And one of the manufacturers over a cup of coffee indicated that it's a little bit like a telephone system or like Verizon or AT&T or just cellular, that you have a user ID and you have certain places within the system that you can operate and work, and you have certain devices that you can use on the system. There are certain devices that you can buy in the open community that won't work on the system, but those that do work on the system have feature sets in them that keep them those I don't want to use the word violation, but those concerns of someone having access to someone else's information without the person knowing that their information has been accessed, it prevents that from occurring. And I wondered if you wanted to communicate, if you wanted to take a minute to share more on that, because this is probably not the first time or the last time that topic will come up, but many of us operate a lot of our operations on telephone systems, and Verizon or AT&T or anyone else technically doesn't have access to the information between the two devices unless it's in the clear, and in the clear for our purposes would be the interoperability channels. And so if it's in an encrypted mode, a P25 encrypted mode, no one except those with the appropriate keys get access to any information, just the other receiving units that are qualified to receive it. And I didn't know if that was helpful or not to the conversation that you brought up. I was trying to wait till you were done to bring that up, and if we need to do more with this, or do you feel like that this is appropriate? We've covered this enough for where we are in the system right now.
That was a mouthful there. There's different layers, a way to look at this, and we've addressed some of these in what we call a slide of misconceptions. Some of that covers encryption communications, for example. Some of it covers control and management of the system. So I'm going to hit a couple, I guess, to perhaps that'll bring some clarity here. The first piece is that every radio that is attached to the system will be known, because every radio, just like every computer has a MAC address and then an IP address, every device that attaches to the system is identified by the system. And the device itself, the radio itself, has to go through an identification process where the system will query the radio will respond, and then the system will determine if the radio is allowed onto it. If the radio is not allowed, again, depending on how things are set up, the system manager can get notification, and he can then disable the radio from the network. So the overall platform is designed so that there is autonomous control for different operations, but you still need a super manager, right? And the super manager basically is responsible for making sure that everybody stays within their limits, and it assesses the health of the system. So, so if we have entity A having their radios, they cannot add their radios to talk groups that belong to entity B. Because the what we call the child keys, which is used for programming the radios, will prevent them from doing that. So in order to do that, what that means is that there has to be interagency agreements so that County A, for example, agrees with County B that they will have access to each other's talk groups or specific interoperability talk groups between those two counties. Once that is agreed, then a child key is generated that opens up that permission to do that. So there's a lot of accountability to prevent people from going rogue and just putting everything that they want on their radios. The other piece of that is that the radios, the system knows where the radios are, what site they're associating with. So these talk groups, it's possible that somebody decides, well, I want to carry this particular talk group to the other side of the state. But if they're not, again, if that's not enabled, then the system will flag that and then a conversation is had. So there's a lot of built-in accountability into this. When it comes to encrypted communication, it's the same deal. Each entity can have their own encrypted talk groups, and if another entity doesn't have the key, there may be even an agreement to share the talk group between the two entities, but if they don't have the keys, they still can't get and monitor those the conversations on those talk groups. So there's different levels and layers of accountability that are built in. So it depends on how you want to look at it. Is it monitoring encryption channels? Is it sharing channels? Is it enabling channels? All of those things are managed down from the local level all the way up to the super manager.
But can the super manager hear conversations that are going on in a particular talk group because they want to?
Super manager it does not have the encryption keys, then no, he cannot. You see the encryption keys get shared by the key owner, and that owner decides who he wants to share it with.
Okay. So if the keys aren't shared, that can't happen. Good, thank you. The second part is if Dallas County, as an example, if Terry McClanahan is running or is in charge of their system keys for that network, the only way someone can get on any of those talk groups is if he gives them permissions and gives them access to that series of numbers and letters that creates a key, and he can withdraw them. So yes, he can give them to them, but if they abuse them, he can go to the system manager and remove those radio IDs from the talk groups, correct?
Correct. As a matter of fact, so the system.
He has complete control then.
Yes, and those child keys are physical keys. They look like a USB drive, and when generated, depending on the specific needs, for example, if an entity wants to give it to their radio shop and contract the radio shop to program all their radios, those keys can be programmed so that they expire after a certain number of days, so that it's not something that remains open out there for somebody else to exploit over time.
Thank you, Melvin. I think there's been some concern that somehow, because it's a statewide system, that there was going to be some level of authority over a user beyond, and I used the Verizon or AT&T example. Verizon and AT&T have a control over our phones. They can say, hey, you're using too much bandwidth and throttle down how much access we have to the internet. But they don't listen in to what we're doing, nor do they necessarily monitor the traffic that's going across there. Do they have access to find a way to get into it? Sure, but they're not necessarily monitoring it any given minute, because anything digital, once it's out there, it's in the digital world. It's kept somewhere. But I thank you for explaining that, because I think I've read a couple of different articles and heard people talk that there's some level of concern that a local user could have autonomy and still be on a statewide system. So thank you for sharing that.
Those are two of the misconceptions, what you've talked about, that we've cleared up in those meetings in PowerPoint, that is on the PowerPoint. Seems to be a big fear out there that the state is going to control, shut you off, take your frequencies, listen to your encryption, and that's just simply not the case. So.
Correct. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll move on to old business. Craig, are you still on the phone?
Yes, sir.
I'll go to old business. If you could update us on the ISSI committee with you and the CIO.
Yes. As I mentioned during the SWIC report, I was able to attend the TIA meeting, and what a benefit of knowledge there is there from particularly, in some instances, other countries that are doing things with the ISSI switches and in a public safety environment. So we've got a couple from Canada to take a closer look at. On the state side, it's largely FDMA that they're working in that space with. But anyway, we are still working through the series of options that may be available to the board, keeping in mind we only have one switch. And I know I've said this before, but I want to remind the board that there's a cost, a monthly cost to somehow connect those ISSI switches to another system.
Unless they can
each core must be connected to every other core. So if there's if there's 3 cores at the statewide system, which there is, and there's 2 cores, or there should be, at every other system out there, a primary and a backup, you can see that the phone line cost for these interfaces can be quite expensive, particularly if they cross a couple of different telephone legs. So who pays that cost? And if somehow the state is expected to pay that cost, I think that the appropriation coming to Isicsb has to go through the roof. So I just wanted to point that out as we continue this conversation. We're trying to keep cost containment in mind and what's the best use of the ISSI switch and what's the upsides and the downsides from the perspective of interoperability. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Under B, the standards working group I talked about last month very quickly at the end before we had to rush out of here. But this is a very, very important, critical working group that's been formed. It's starting with Tracy Bearden. She's going to come up and explain the progress and what their goals are. And Terry McClanahan in the back of the room is also on that subcommittee working group. This is a extremely important step that we need to take on policies. We talked about best practices from other states on policies on using the system, and that's what they're charged with, is to get that taken care of. And they're going to be a very aggressive schedule here to get this knocked out. And I truly appreciate the effort that's going to go into this. So go ahead.
Good morning. I'm going to be really brief. We just started meeting this week. We've met twice already. We're going to meet next week. So as Bureau Chief Lampy said, we're doing a very aggressive schedule because our goal is to develop these standards, policies, and procedures to protect the integrity of the system. We need to make sure that the statewide integrity is protected. That means that people that just jump on the system need to follow these policy procedures and comply. So we understand that it's important for us to get those out because they need to have the proper notice. If they're going to comply and they're on the system and they've been approved preliminarily right now, they need to be able to sign, see what they're going to be held accountable, and the standards and procedures. So we're working very aggressively to do that. So how are we doing this? Well, we're looking at other jurisdictions that have the same pretty much same operating platforms that Iowa is wanting to implement with the statewide system. We're consulting experts in the area as needed, and if you have any recommendations that you want to provide, we will welcome those. So you can just contact me. Bureau Chief Lampy does have my contact information, so if you need that. But we are working very, very, very hard to get this done and get them drafted. Right now we're working on the critical ones to get those out first, but we hope to have everything done in the next couple months. So anybody have any questions?
Approximately how many policies are we looking at here total? And I realize more will come.
Well, right now the criticals were at 37. And that's not the entire, that's just the critical ones that have to go out ASAP, because those are the ones that will provide them the notice what they have to do to be able to not only protect the integrity of the system, but then the required maintenance of being a member on the statewide system, because there's going to be certain expectations that you must comply with, and you'll be asked to sign and date, and that you understand and that you will comply, and there will be repercussions if you don't.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Move on to C. Patrick, are you still on the phone?
Yes.
I've got this listed under 214-01. Am I correct or am I wrong here? This public notice one you put out, the one you talked about earlier, is that replace 214-01?
Let me pull that up here.
Because I think 214-01 is quite lengthy and deals with also the formation of the RICs and how that structure goes. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Is there two separate things here, or did you convert them to one?
I have to look that up here.
Formation of the RICs
That was 2015? Okay. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's my typo. It should be 2015-01. Because isn't there parts of this in 215-01, or is this totally separate? This is a totally separate document then? Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. Oh, that one pager with that listed the frequencies. I got it. Okay, yeah, I've got the question answered, Patrick.
Okay.
We'll move on to new business. Like Chair Buffington indicated, we have two applications that have to be reviewed, Kossuth and Des Moines. They'll be reviewing those here in their meeting. The other thing I added for the agenda was the SWIC letter to the agencies, and I'll start with that. What I'd like to do is direct our statewide interoperability coordinator to draft a letter on behalf of the board that could be sent out to the statewide on a distribution list that we have, so not only including all the PSAPs, sheriffs, police, that are building new systems and or have current systems in place, to make sure that we abide by our duties as a board under 80, 28, and 29 to ensure interoperability in the state with this statewide system. I'm sure you don't, I surely don't care what county or city uses for their operational use. What vendor they use doesn't make any difference, but we have a P25 system that you can talk on statewide for interoperability purposes, and that's our charge as board members. So I would like the SWIC to direct a letter offering assistance in how that is going to happen and how they could connect to the statewide in a very easy way, or there's lots of ways to do it. And I would like the SWIC to at least reach out to those and draft that letter to offer assistance, because I truly believe that's our SWIC's job as an interoperability coordinator, to make sure that that path to the state system is done, even though they have their own systems in which they're entitled to. Even if they did use the Isicsb platform for operational use, which some are going to, they still have to learn about the interop piece of the state system. So that's what that letter would consist of. I would ask that he draft that up, and then we could review it and get that sent out. So we meet our obligations under the code also. Is there any more comment on that? Is that a good idea, or should we not do that, or I'll get your thoughts.
I guess I can comment on that. I think it's a great idea to actually do that, just to make sure that there are agencies that are out there that may not be aware what the full capabilities of what the platform can offer. And I think that's one of those things that needs to happen.
It'll clear up more miscommunication and just make it, here it is, a lot easier than them trying to go find it.
Okay. Craig, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. Assignment accepted.
Appreciate it. We'll get that done. Okay, I'll move on to the next amended item I put on there was the grant language in the skip. And Craig, if you could elaborate on that, please.
Yes. So there's a couple of issues. as we've learned, many of the grant applications now say that refer to the SCIP. And our SCIP is silent with regard to how grant funds should be spent with regard to interoperability equipment. And in examining this, we could put ourselves in in talking to it's one of the things I talked to folks at the National Council of SWCS about. Some of them have complained that they're going back and revising your SCIP with just to address this issue. And so to avoid that, I had some conversations with the folks at DHS, and we can make an adjustment to our SCIP that says, and then we would put it under the heading of standards-based technologies and grants compliance. It would read as such, read as follows. The Iowa SCIP incorporates by reference all Isicsb policies and procedures, as well as resolutions of the 911 Council. That's it. So what that does is that gives our SCIP then points it rather than rewriting it each time and adding things to it. We merely incorporate the website locations of the two entities, Isicsb policies and procedures, and the 911 Council. And the reason that's important is the 911 Council about 2 years ago took some action with regard to how they're granting funds to attempt to align and be compliant with the upcoming system. At that time it was upcoming, now it's much closer. And they may need to make changes to that. One of those changes may need to be that we have TDMA included in the equipment that's grant purchased rather than capable. And why I say that is because what we're learning is many entities, some of the now, purchased equipment that is FBMA and TDMA capable, but it wasn't purchased in the radios, and it can be upwards of several $100s per radio to bring it up to that technological shift. So if we make a decision to have a requirement that grant funds include TDMA, rather than having to write the policy and then turn around and go back and update the SCIP, this would allow us to do it just once. So there will be a position paper coming out that would basically be a policy statement addressing this. What I'd like to get from the board at this time, I believe we can adjust the SCIP by resolution, that we adjust the SCIP to say Iowa SCIP incorporates by reference all Isicsb policies and procedures as well as resolutions of the 911 Council, period. If we get a resolution to that effect, we can make an adjustment to the SCIP, update DHS, and then our future grants will be pointed in that direction. That's all.
With that being said, I'll take a motion for that statement. If you want to read it again, Craig, if board members need to hear that in order to make the motion. Otherwise, we can go off what you just said. I'll take a motion to do just that, to amend the SCIP, to add that language. Motion is open for a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Ellen, do you have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Second, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
That's all, Chair. Thank you. I'll be putting together a position paper or policy statement on the TDMA impacts of grant funds.
Thank you.
For the board.
We're on to the public comment phase. If anybody'd like to come to the podium and address the board, you can. Samantha?
Hi everyone, Samantha Brea, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I brought this up at the 911 Council meeting, but I thought it was important enough to bring up at your meeting as well. We had an issue on Monday with the wireless emergency alerts. We've been working really hard in Iowa to get it implemented in most of the counties. Right now we're working on about 68 counties having that capability. And if you don't know, wireless emergency alerts are that message you receive on your phone that's like an Amber Alert or tornado warning that makes that sound that you're not used to and brings attention to the message. So US Cellular on Monday sent an alert by accident to the majority of their customer base in 10 states in the United States. it was very unexpected, and it inundated a lot of the 911 centers with concerned citizens, especially as it was day before the election. So it took about 6 hours or so for US Cellular to get back to me, but they explained that they were doing testing and inadvertently sent out a message. A lot of people were actually receiving more than one message, and this was because they were driving or moving around, and so the cell phone was reaching out to a new tower, and as the cell phone hit the new tower, they received a new alert. So some people received up to 20 messages through the course of a few hours. Luckily, they put a stop to that. I'm in coordination, our office is in coordination with the FCC to further investigate what happened, what can be done in the future to stop this from happening again, and hopefully they can be held accountable for the mistake. Because the big issue here is that they told a lot of their customers to turn off their emergency alerts. And the majority of those customers, I would presume, will either not remember to turn them back on, or now they don't want to be annoyed by these messages that they repeatedly got that were test alerts. So that's a great concern for us because there's a large customer base in Iowa who uses US Cellular. So like I said, we'll be working with the FCC to see if we can coordinate some kind of message with them to make sure US Cellular are aware of how much of an issue this really was.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Did anybody get one? I did. Did you? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Rob.
Rob Coppard with Cass County 911. On behalf of what the Iowa 911 Communications Council did with regards to what Samantha brought up, we made a motion to write a letter on behalf of, from the council to the appropriate body, I believe the FCC or whomever, strongly suggesting that this be resolved and fixed. And I would maybe request that the Isicsb board do the same thing. Thank you.
Is it resolved and fixed, or is it still in limbo, or do we have an issue with them not wanting to fix it? Yeah.
Chair, and Rob, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that during the 911 meeting, the letter was going to go to US Cellular asking to resolve the issue, as well as to implore US Cellular to go back to their customer base and ask them to please turn on their wireless alerts, just so that we don't lose that critical resource. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so the current issue at hand has been resolved, but the likelihood of this happening again, we don't know what that is. I think there should be stronger restrictions on testing, because if it's that easy to send out a message, that's quite concerning, even to all other providers. If US Cellular can do it, then all the other providers can do it as well.
Correct.
So it's more of a caution that maybe you want to think about other ways to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and to please let your customer base know to turn those alerts back on. John Benson and myself had a meeting with the media relations person from US Cellular, and they said that they were going to be very reactive with their releases. And anyone that wanted to know more information, they would release information to, but otherwise they didn't really want to send out messages to all of their customer base. But trying to work with the FCC to see if maybe they can change that point of view.
Okay. Is there a possibility we get a copy of the letter you sent, so we'll just draft the same thing?
The one that the 911 Council sent?
Yes.
Yeah.
If I could take a motion to do just that, to mirror that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Pass? Opposed? Getting late. Opposed? Okay, motion passed.
Thank you.
Yep. If you could get it to me, I'll take a look at it and I'll push it out by email to make sure everybody sees it, and then we'll do just that. Anyone else? Okay, motion for adjournment. Second. We're adjourned.